Good evening, everybody, and welcome to our council meeting of February 22nd, 2021. I believe our systems are all set up for our millions of viewers at home to join us this evening. And our regular staff members,
yes, everything
CEO Walker
is ready.
and Manager Carr are here. Okay. So on that basis then, Councillor Lagasse had contacted me earlier in the day. She's working at a location that has very poor internet capability and was unsure whether she'd be able to join us this evening or not. So it doesn't look like that's worked out for her. So on that basis then, I would take a motion to open the meeting. Moved by Councillor Foisey, seconded by Councillor Viancourt, that this meeting be opened at 7:02 p.m. All in favor? Carried. Our last meeting was January 25th, and we have minutes in our package related to it. I would take a mover and a seconder to adopt those minutes. Moved by Councillor Corbett, seconded by Councillor Viancourt, that the minutes of the regular meeting held January 25th, 2022 be adopted as circulated. All in favor? Carried. Any disclosures of pecuniary interest in the general nature thereof? Okay. This evening we have a presentation, Paul Preston and Donna Clark, regarding interim control bylaw to stop short-term rental commercial use in residential neighborhoods of Bonfield. And I will give them a moment to join our meeting. Whenever you're so ready, the floor is yours.
Sorry, is that for me, Mayor? I'm sorry,
Yes.
I just caught the end of that there.
No, you're welcome to begin whenever you're ready.
Okay, thanks very much. Can I share my screen and show my brief presentation there?
Yes.
Please? Is that working? Can anybody hear me?
I can, yes. I believe everybody else can also.
Yeah, and you can see the presentation?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, thanks. Sorry about the stutter start there. Yeah, thanks very much. My name's Paul Preston. I'm speaking on behalf on our newly formed Good Neighbors of Bonfield Association, which is a group of residents concerned about the damage to our neighborhoods by these commercial short-term rentals. And we all live in Bonfield. We all love Bonfield, and we love the motto "Small community, big heart." And to us, a big heart means that we care for each other as neighbors, and we stand up for each other when those that would harm our neighborhoods start to harm our neighborhoods, so for their own profit. So I want to start just with some basic definitions, given that our bylaws are written very well and in plain English, not in legal jargon for all of us to understand. These are coming from just a simple dictionary. Residential relates to residences, which is a place, especially the house in which a person lives or resides. It's their dwelling or home. And to reside is to dwell permanently or for a considerable length of time. A dwelling is a building or a place of residence, or our abode or our home. And our home is our house or apartment or other shelter. That's our usual residence. Our residence is all about long-term. It's inherently about long-term dwellings. Whereas commercial is about engaging in commerce, which is the interchange of goods and commodities to buy and sell. And so a whole lot of that going on next door. Whereas hotels are commercial restaurants offering lodgings for travelers. So just showing some pictures of our bylaws. You know, tourist establishment and the tourist homes are defined as establishments that provide sleeping accommodations, whether without meals and in various fashions. And this is an allowed use as a commercial use. Again, it's a commercial use in both our C2 zone and in our C3 zone. Tourist establishments are permitted uses. Again, the bylaws use inclusive language, meaning it states what's allowed. It doesn't state every possible thing that's not allowed. That would be impossible. You'd have to include nuclear plants and strip clubs and who knows what you'd have to include there. Bed and breakfast is also defined, and it's allowed in some of the zones, including the rural zones and a couple of the residential zones. A dwelling is defined as a home or residence, and we know that means it's a long-term or permanent place in which we live. It's our home. This is the residential zone. Again, you see a dwelling. There's no commercial uses in any of the residential zones in Bonfield Township. It's a well-written document. There's different forms of dwellings allowed in R2, but again, no commercial uses. And in the RLS zone that I'm in, dwellings are allowed. Again, no commercial uses are used. And yet this commercial venture is opened up next to me last summer. You can rent it for $600 a night or $4,200 a night. And it takes Visa, MasterCard, and American Express, yet claims not to be a commercial venture. Sure looks like one to everyone else in the world. You can see it's pretty well booked this summer. So my neighbors and I and my wife have got another nightmare summer with all these strangers coming up and being up to all hours of the night and mischief, and we can no longer have the peaceful enjoyment of our properties. I just want to address some of the arguments from the town lawyer. He says that the township's bylaw, where in the township's bylaw is the owner of a cottage or single detached dwelling permitted to rent that building for a period exceeding 30 days? Right there in the bylaw, it states permitted use, residential use dwelling, and it doesn't say whether you have to rent it, whether you have to own it, whether you can be up to the yin yang in a mortgage or own it outright or own multiple. It doesn't matter how you do it as long as it's a residential use, which means it's a dwelling and you live there for a long period of time or permanently. He also states, in other words, if one accepts the argument that in the absence of express authority to rent a cottage or a single attached dwelling on a short-term basis, such use is prohibited, then one must also conclude that the absence of express authority for a long-term rental, longer than 30 days, such as a long-term rental, must also be prohibited. And that's not correct. That's a false extrapolation based on falsely equating very different uses of residential versus tourist accommodation. A tourist means they're on tour, they're traveling, they're using short-term rentals, and to reside is to dwell permanently or for a considerable length of time. That's the definition of residing. And a dwelling is a building or a place of residence, their abode or their home. That's in every dictionary. So rental on a short-term basis is a tourist accommodation, not a residential use, and it's a commercial use, as is pointed out in the bylaw for C2 and C3 zones. And there are no commercial uses allowed in residential zones in the township of Bonfield. That's why it's called a residential zone, not a residential and a commercial zone. Longer term rental is a permitted use. That's because it's a residential use as a dwelling. So the answer is it's in the bylaws. He also states, although it can be taken for granted that a person is entitled or permitted to rent a house to a tenant on an annual basis, and no one would argue with that. Most, if not all, zoning bylaws contain no express permission for such long-term rentals. And why should they? Because renting it for a year is a permitted residential use, whether they're renting it or owning it or have a mortgage or own it outright or however they're there for as a residential use. It's about their being there as a long-term rental, while renting it for a day or a weekend is a commercial tourist accommodation use, which is implicitly a short-term rental. And it is permitted if it's in C2 or C3, but not in the residential zones. It's permitted in the commercial zones. So residential use is implicitly long.
Mr. Preston, Mr.
Sorry?
Preston, if I can just get you to pause for 1 second.
Yeah.
I did communicate that I was going to allow a maximum of 10 minutes for the presentation here in this portion of the meeting. And you are at 7 minutes now.
Well, I was at 6 minutes when you stopped me there. Yeah.
For
Yeah.
Okay, are you wanting to continue?
Yeah. I'm going to pass it over to her there as soon as I get to a couple more slides.
Okay, and then through you, your worship, if you want to extend the additional time for the presentation, that is well within your purview. Go ahead, Paul.
Okay, thank you. So again, residential use is implicitly long-term. That's what residential means. And tourist use is implicitly short-term. I mean, you can spell it out if you need to, but it's right in the meaning of the words. So hotels are not homes. Tourists have very different usages than people that live in the homes. I think we all have that experience as living in homes and sometimes being tourists ourselves. And they're not compatible usages. And pretending that they are makes a mockery of the planning and zoning bylaws. So we've read about the domino effect in many other communities around the world where this is happening. These illegal short-term rentals in residential zones are rapidly driving up residential home pricing to unreachable levels present residential use because they're buying residential homes for commercial usage as a short-term rental. And this lessens the supply of homes, and it ensures that only these commercial purchasers can outbid residential purchasers because of the income it produces for them. So it's a self-perpetuating cycle where the more that they buy it, the only people that can buy these homes now are these commercial purchasers who have no interest in the neighbors. They're just there for a profit. And this causes a domino effect where short-term rentals take over the entire neighborhoods. And this has happened across the world in various communities. It's the last thing that I want. So my experience is that these folks are wolves in sheep's clothing. I was reading that fable to my granddaughter and on the weekend, and I realized that's how I got taken and welcome these commercial renters, rental business people into our neighborhood and help them even dig a trench across my property so they could access my my internet tower, and then found out they're wolf in sheep's clothing. So with that, I'll turn it over to my co-chair, Donna. Thanks.
Next slide, Paul.
And Donna, if I can ask you to be a little more brief and
Yes.
try to wrap up in 3 minutes.
Exactly.
And then your worship, do you want to extend a little more time?
I
You
don't
can do
have
so
to.
happy.
Oh, well, yes, I'm going to give them until 7:16 because we didn't really start the presentation until then. So.
Okay. Thank you. As Paul mentioned, my name is Donna. This issue was brought to council last July, and it has really brought the community together. A lot of us are meeting for the first time around a shared viewpoint of how we want our community to look and feel. A petition was started in late December, and to date there are 125 signatures in favor of banning short-term rentals, and the number is growing. We know that this is an issue in other municipalities, and we've reached out to some of the smaller communities to get a feel of what they've been doing to address the issue. Some of them are further along in the process, but we feel that there's a lot that we can learn from them. As an example, the township of Oro-Medonte has chosen to amend its bylaw language for clarity around short-term rentals, putting in, use and the 28 consecutive days or less. So they've just changed their language. They also have a similar bylaw to Bonfield. Even the larger cities have to implement rules and regulations in order to address the issue. It's our understanding that North Bay is also looking to amend their bylaws. Now, big cities have many resources and large budgets that can handle the administration, so that's really not the expectation for us here in our really nice small community of Bonfield. And our research is ongoing, and we would be happy to share any findings with the town that we have in order to assist. So finally, we do have a request of council. We would like to work with the township for a speedy resolution. Firstly, we would like to enforce the current bylaw, which forbids the commercial use of short-term rentals as tourist accommodation in residential zones. And I think Paul has stated that it's clear language, there's no ambiguity, and we feel that it's within council's mandate to pass that. If not, if you feel that further clarity is necessary, then we would like you to pass an interim control bylaw, which is authorized under Section 38 of the Planning Act. And we feel that this is also something that you can do, as a review is coming up this year. So that is well within the legal rights of council. Our target date for resolution is March 22nd, as Paul pointed out. Summer is coming up, so this is a heavy time for rentals. So we would like to put this issue to bed well before the summer season starts. And that's it for us. We'd like to remain a small community with a big heart. If you need further information or you'd like to meet with us to discuss any of the points raised, we're happy to accommodate that. And we really thank you for allowing us to present and bring our concerns to you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Minutes and reports of municipal committees and boards. We'll just wait a moment here while the screen share is closed out. Planning Advisory has not had a meeting, nor is the chair present this evening, so I don't believe there's any comment on it. There's further discussion about Planning Advisory Committee later in the meeting. Fire Department?
We haven't had a meeting in the last couple of months, so I think we're working on one soon, whenever we can get one going.
Okay.
Just on a note, we've had, I guess, purchased of the ice rescue. Actually, it's coming up in disbursements anyway. So I think that's been done for the fire department.
Okay, good. Recreation and fitness, while I have you.
We got one coming up next month. So we've been a while.
Okay.
So, yeah.
The good news is the $500,000 of Northern Ontario Heritage Fund money
Yes.
that came our way for the waterfront master plan will take us a long ways towards doing some good things there in that recreation department.
Yep. All right.
Library.
Yes, we did have a meeting on Monday, February 7th, and the highlight of the meeting is that the library board has prepared a draft operating budget with an increase of about just under 5%.
Okay.
That's about it.
General government has not met of late. Police services hasn't either, although to me and another member of our former, I guess we'll call it, police services board, we were in discussion today and we were discussing the large police action that took place in the city of Ottawa over the course of the weekend. And we're mulling over the cost of that amount of resources that were there and the logistics behind it all that quite often gets discussed at our police service board conferences. So I have no doubt that at our next police service board conference, if in fact we can have an in-person one, there'll be a great deal of conversation and presentation related to this event that while it's not over yet, it's in the final stages, I believe, of the convoy and so forth, and the Parliament buildings and their occupation in Ottawa. Emergency management will meet tomorrow morning. The agenda has been circulated to the members of the emergency control group, and for our listeners this evening and for council, I just wanted to remind and advise that our community emergency management coordinator position has been filled. Mr. Alan Reed has stepped up to the challenge there and has joined our staff in that part-time role. So we welcome him to our group. And CAO Walker, do you have anything to state at the moment related to emergency management and the COVID situation at all?
Through your worship, really, there's nothing else stated at this time. I am looking forward to tomorrow's meeting and having an opportunity to review the current situation in our district, inside our municipality, and throughout the province. That's all I'll add for now. Thank you for the opportunity.
Okay, thank you. And Public Works, Manager Carr is here. Obviously, the weather outside this evening is yet another barrage of weather challenge for your department, but do you have any information or news for us this evening?
Well, the news is the plows have left the building about 10 minutes ago to go out and address all of our main roads. Thank you to our residents for your patience and understanding today as we left the ice pellets there to soak up any liquid rain event. as we struggle with the last rain event still that is apparent in our roads and our driveways. We're working on the tender for all the deep culverts that have to be addressed still on Development Road with our engineer. We've engaged the funding that we received to have the weather barrier put on the ring. So some investigative work has been done with that. And it looks favorable for an early summer job to be complete. Currently, I'm looking at some funding for sidewalk replacement. I hope to have a little report ready for our next council meeting. It's a 60-40 funding opportunity, and we'll see if council's willing to entertain the idea with the funding.
Okay, thank you for reminding us of the other grant that we received, which is the funding through Trillium as the funding source for the curtains, I'll call them, for the outdoor rink that'll keep both the snow from blowing in there, but also in the summertime, those rainy, windy days that we get where the rain blows in, particularly I can recall a number of Canada Day events that we had there where we're walking around in a lot of water because the rain was blowing into the facility either the day before or the actual day of, and these will go a long ways towards preventing that from happening in the future. So that's good that that's going to happen in short order. There's no motions from any of the committees, so I would move then to reports and non-municipal committees and boards, and Phenom has sent out a little bit of information to us by email to the members of council. There's a number of these forums that they're holding that councillors can participate in if they so desire virtually, and that's their way of trying to keep the engagement alive with the association and the members under these difficult circumstances for all associations that they've had communicating with their membership. Conservation Authority, our member is not present this evening, and I don't believe there's any report of significance that I've seen across the table related to it. And further on in our agenda, we have a number of documents from Castleholm related to the redevelopment and the construction project there and the financing of that massive construction project that as member municipalities were part of. It evolves day by day, and the city of North Bay has taken the lead now in trying to refine all of this with Infrastructure Ontario so that when it comes to our municipal table, it's pretty well a document that's very workable. Is there anything on that, CAO Walker, that you'd like to add, or have I covered it well enough for now? He appears to be frozen in time. Okay, I'll come back to him later if he has strong
Your
comments.
worship, you don't mind. Yes, I think you've hit all the highlights in that. I did get another email from our client.
Okay. Thank you. So moving then to item 7 of our agenda, notices of motion. We have 2 of them, both of which were submitted by Councillor Foisey. I'll let Councillor Foisey speak to those.
Go
And I
ahead
have a
and
bit of
proceed,
news
Worship.
for council related to the Planning Advisory Committee that I'll share. But Councillor Foisey had his hand up to speak there, so please do so.
Yeah, I'd like to retract notice of motion 7.2 as it will be dealt with at item 10.1.
Okay. That's related to the reimbursement of severance fees.
Yeah.
Okay. And 7.1 then?
Yeah, I'd like to have quite some stuff to read there. It all started with email exchange regarding a severance application. Member Foisey, June 8, 2021. If a proposal severance does not meet requirements for approval, it should not be even brought to our attention. I do not want to be put in a situation where the planning committee has to make a decision, or it could be interpreted as giving someone preferential treatment. You have told the applicant that the proposal does not meet the requirements, therefore, please do not pass it on to us. Thank you. Member Foisey, June 8, 2021. I did not make a sarcastic remark towards you. I'm sorry if you perceived it that way. I find it very unusual that we have a consultation meeting before regular Planning Advisory Committee meeting. This is the first in 7 years on the committee. You are the expert. What are your comments on this application? Do you think it should be processed? And why? Does the applicant need a plan of subdivision, etc.? Without additional info, my answer would be no. Member Foisey, June 9, 2021. Good afternoon. Thank you for the additional info about the applicant's proposal. In view of this information, I am in favor of granting the severance. Please, in the future, bring your info to the committee meetings so that we can proceed with helping people establish a home in Bonnfield. I believe that email meetings are not appropriate. Your input is essential with all applications. Let me reiterate that I do not suggest that we are granting preferential treatment. I wrote that it may be interpreted as preferential treatment, which is a big difference. Tail end of June 9th, 2021 meeting. Councillor Legacy. Mayor McLaren, may I talk? May I please talk? Mayor McLaren? Okay. Councillor Legacy, regarding our lives matter, I held silent at this time. Since June 9th, there have been many complaints that have been using up our tax dollars, and I find it a really good time for me to speak. I need to voice my concerns. I need to voice how I'm disappointed in that letter that came out to the residents last year. I'm disappointed in the councillor how he reacts to meeting, how the negative has come into this meeting. I would really like to see council come together and do good work like your residents voted us in to do. This negativity has to stop. If someone did do wrong, own up to it. Own up to it, whatever the reason, just do it. Because right now it's involving my own planning meeting. Today we were receiving letters where my planner is felt that is being not spoken to right. Now I have to watch my word because you really have to watch what you say because it could go against you. But I'm tired, very tired, and I caution this council that the negativity has to stop. We have to get back together, have to stop. Enough is enough. That's all I'm going to be saying tonight. June 10th email by Chair Legacy. Good morning, Eric. I hope you are well and enjoying this beautiful summer. As I mentioned last night's council meeting, I am disappointed in the toxicity on council and even more now that it has spilled into our committee. I see I'm not the only one who feels this way as to the response from both our director and one of our members who together have over half-decade of experience, and I value both. I would like to make myself clear that negative behavior is not tolerated here in the Planning and Development Committee. So please leave it at the door so that we can make good, sound decisions. It is appreciated that you move on to either leave the committee or help us to help the residents that rely on us. I will respect either decision you make. Planning Advisory Meeting, recorded and displayed on YouTube, Bonnfield Township, October 5th, 2021. Chair Legacy, I guess we will be going against the recommendation from the Algonquins of Ontario. Is that the intent of the committee? That's the intent of this committee, that we will be going against the intentions, the request of the Algonquins of Ontario. Member Pocket, I don't want to go against anybody. I don't appreciate that comment. Chair Legacy, all right, Tom, if everyone, I know. I'd like to see option 2 at least go through, but if the rest of the committee would like to see option 1, I will call a recorded vote, please. December 7th, 2021. Chair Legacy, I will ask There was a letter that went out to council in regards to the meeting last October, and it was, how can I put it, a little disturbing. There was mention of my committee member resigning. Is this the intent? Like, do you want to discuss the letter? I think it should be addressed. It was from the Planning Advisory Committee members. Member Pocket. I have an issue because the motion, the choices that were given to us, I had an objection to that. We weren't given the opportunity to discuss it. I also had a concern that our chair had a conflict of interest with respect to the fact that you, the chair, works for the Algonquins, and she was acting on behalf of the township. And afterwards then, when the meeting came, when this motion came to council, it appeared the Planning Advisory Board was only an advisory board, and I can't remember, and I think it has been 25 or 26, maybe even longer years that I sat on planning. And I can't remember where it was set out that we recommended that a severance be granted and then put in that motion, who has to pay for it? And we were given three choices. The first choice, everything was in compliance with the severance. And then the next choice was to have the church pay for it. And then there was another choice, and I'm not altogether sure if I remember it. It was have the church pay for the first and second application or archaeological assessment. I felt that the planning board was thrown under the bus. And I don't feel that I would like to sit on a planning board when the planning board is treated like that. And I don't know if the two other members can speak. I know that member Foisy had an interest, our chair had an interest, and the next person that could have come into the meeting would have been the mayor. And that's all I can say about it. I just didn't feel right about it and it could very easily resign. I've been on the planning board long enough, but I don't expect to be treated like that in a meeting. And that's, if anybody else have anything to say, that's fine. Member Rowe. I agree with that. Yes, I agree with that. It had slipped my mind for a few minutes. Yes, I'm quite in agreement with that, with what Neri just said. Chair Legacy, any comments from Member Duchesne? Member Duchesne, yes, I think we were pushed around. It was kind of pushed on us, but you guys are the bosses and we're just the little people. That's how I felt. Chair Legacy. All right, okay, so I've heard from all three of you, and I will say that it's not up to anyone, if I could describe this correctly, it's not up to anyone to tell anyone that they have a conflict of interest. Member Pocket, unless you can prove that they do. Chair Legacy. Okay, so because I work for the Algonquins of Ontario, that does not mean that I'm getting any money into my pocket from that meeting. There was no money coming into my pocket resulting from that severance. None, zero. My second thing is a lot of us work for different corporations. And like you, Neri, you work for a lawyer firm. It's kind of, I don't know, we all belong to many meetings, committees, and much like financial committees. And sometimes we think that we need to have a conflict of interest to declare it. I, on the other hand, because I work for the Algonquins of Ontario, am also a member of St. Bernadette Church. I've been all my life. Every event that's ever come, will have seen me volunteer my services. Hours and days of service volunteer. I'm not the only one. I'm sure there's a couple of others on this committee that's done. But I'm also a resident of the township of Bonfield. The meeting was very hectic. No one raised their hand. No one waited to talk. It was very hectic, and if you listen to it, I was having a lot of problems with my internet. So you see where I'm coming from. In and out. It was very hectic. And I appreciate that everybody's letting me talk right now because that wasn't the chance there. So I wish it would have come out probably a little different, but I'm not going to apologize, and that's all I have to say about that right now. So I guess the ball is in your court. Member Pocket, fine with me. I don't know about the other two, but it's fine with me. If you want me to hand in my resignation, I could do that tomorrow morning. Chair Legacy, that's entirely up to you. Member Pocket, exactly. I don't have a problem with it at all. Chair Legacy, all right. Member Pocket, I think that now, one last thing I have to say is the fact that you said to us, you're against the Algonquins, and I took very much offense with that. You did say that. You look at the meeting. You have a look at it. If you don't think you said that, I know you did because I said I'm not against anyone, and that's fine. I could hand in my resignation in tomorrow. Member Rowe, and I can too. Member Shine, I'm out of here. Member Legacy, okay. Is there anything else? December 14 regular council meeting.
Just
CAO Johnson.
Councillor Foisey, I'm sorry to interrupt you there, but while we appreciate the rundown of all the dialogue on the meeting, your notice of motion was where we're at on the agenda, and it speaks to, I guess, a pair of choices, option 1 and option 2 for council. Before we go any further with that, though, I just want to maybe advise council and yourself what transpired today. I had a conversation with Member Paquette of the Planning Advisory Committee, a good, long, healthy discussion about what you've just recapped for council there. And I also had previously a discussion with Chair Legacy. And while both members feel an apology is warranted back and forth, both have expressed to me that they are willing to set this whole matter aside and continue to work for the benefit of the Planning Advisory Committee. So when I pushed that goodwill a bit further, and I asked Member Paquette today if she would, knowing that this was on the agenda, I described to her, the options that were before council tonight, and I wasn't certain which way it would go. And the same to Chair Legacy. I was unsure when I spoke with her last week which way it would go, and I'm still unsure if we in fact do proceed with either choice. But what I've been told today by Member Paquette is that it's fine with her if we just, because I guess what the other break in the ice, if we want to call it that way, is the withdrawal of the application that caused all of this conversation. Further in the agenda, it's withdrawn the severance application, and there's conversation going to happen about the reimbursement of the fees. Where it sits now is all of that difficult dialogue that you described there is basically a moot point, in that Chair Legacy and Member Paquette, and I didn't speak to Member Rowe or Member Duchesne, but it would seem that if we did not accept the resignation tonight, Member Paquette is fine with that. And I said, are you suggesting to me then that if we call a Planning Advisory Committee meeting next month, for example, if we have necessity for one, that quorum will show up? And she committed to me, at least, that she will continue to serve if we do not accept her resignation. And Member Legacy has very strongly stated to me that she fully intends to stay a member of the Planning Advisory Committee, pending whatever council decided tonight. So I guess the good news that I want to say to you is that the parties have agreed to disagree, set this aside, and move forward as a Planning Advisory Committee. So whether we want to entertain option 1 or option 2, that's up to council. But what I'm suggesting to you tonight is that I think we can move past this, and that's what I've been trying to work towards for a while now, since before Christmas. And it's finally lined up that all parties seem to want to put this behind them in a positive, more positive way. So that's what I have to share with council right now. And I wanted to say that before you went on any further in recounting the discussion that took place, because I think it's important change that's happened. But Councillor Foisey, please continue. Your with your notice of motion comments.
On December 14th, from CEO Johnson. Just to Councillor Corbett's point, I just want to be what you support. What you just said, Your Worship, Councillor Corbett. The membership on this committee, on any other committee, is entirely within the authority of council. That the Planning Advisory Committee or any other committee of the municipality over than even the library board. They're not an autonomous. Council has full authority in this regard. So, and I guess that's all I had to say, just so it's more complete than what Councillor Legacy said the last meeting.
Okay, so the notice of motion procedure is that the conversation of this will reappear under new business in the agenda anyway. So is there anything further at this point then on it? Okay. Introduction and consideration of bylaws.
Sorry, point of order,
8.1.
Your Worship.
Yes.
Just point of order. Is it Councillor Foy's intention to allow the motion to stand? So if it's his intention to allow the motion to stand, my point of order is twofold. In reviewing the bylaws, section 2.1 of the bylaws, which appoints councillors for the term to a committee for the term of the council, there is no mechanism within our bylaws to remove council members from a committee as a chair or vice chair, as I read it. And insofar going back as to the reason for the motion to remove Councillor Gassi, if you review section 8 of the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act, councillors actually don't have the authority to have any punitive action against another council member, nor can we actually insist on the council member declaring conflict of interest. That actually can happen through the Integrity Commissioner or through a court and a judge deciding. So my point of order is under section 17.2 of our bylaws, if a council member, if a motion is actually not, one moment, I'll just pull it up. A motion in respect to a matter which is beyond the jurisdiction of council shall not be in order. I would actually rule that motion 1 is not in order for council to decide on.
So we go with option 2. Okay.
Councillor Corbett, did you have any further to add on the matter?
I don't. I'll wait for your ruling.
Pardon? Oh, okay.
I'll wait for your ruling. Don't.
Well, thank you for pointing that out, and I don't doubt that what you've stated there is likely the fact. I didn't research it in that regard, but I did state earlier in a prior meeting that council doesn't generally enjoy firing chairs and vice chairs of their committees as a point of practice. Whether we get down into the rule book or not is somewhere I generally tend to avoid, because I try to do things on a consensus basis. But having said that, it's almost like what I stated a few minutes ago fell on deaf ears, because I think the whole notion of needing to have further dialogue on this has set aside, in that I have, reached out to the parties, and all parties seem to want to continue to work going forward for the betterment of the municipality, knowing that this planning advisory committee really only has a lifespan of about another 9 months of this term of council. So it would seem that if we could work towards keeping the group together, it would be in everybody's interest. Councillor Vinecore, you had a question or comment?
Yeah, just, so you said Member McCarthy would entertain, does she want us to have a vote on a letter of not accepting a resignation? Or, because if I read Councillor Foisey's option 2, it's saying to accept the resignation.
Yeah.
Or do we just not even entertain it because of the Councillor
My
Corbett?
advice-
Yeah.
My advice would be not to entertain it at all. A notice of motion later in the meeting under new business always needs a mover and a seconder to be tabled anyway. So if it wasn't tabled at all, where I left it with Member Paquette was that, would you be offended if we just don't accept your resignation? And she said, no, that would be fine. And I'd continue to show up for my meetings. So that's where I think, voting on it one way or the other or discussing it any further is not going to help that process.
All right.
If you want me to retract it, I'd be fine with that. No problem.
Well,
Okay.
I'm there again, if we're going to stick to the rule book, I'm not really allowed to let you retract it because you've placed it on the agenda as a notice of motion, both 7.1 and 7.2. 7.2 being the reimbursement of the severance application fees for B20 2021. And as you described in your recap of that, in one of those planning advisory committee meetings, you had declared interest related to that application in that you were on the parish finance committee. Later in a council meeting, I believe, you had stated to council that you no longer held such a pecuniary interest because you had resigned from the finance committee of the parish, which when I saw this on the agenda last Friday, it caused me to wonder to myself how you came to know then that the parish was withdrawing the application in time for you to prepare the notice of motion for reimbursement that's on the agenda. So you can't have it both ways. Either you're on the finance committee or you're not. And it does leave a bit of point to wonder which side of the fence you're on in that regard.
No, I go to church and we talk.
You talk. Okay. Okay. Well, very good then. I'm glad you do. So I guess for the procedural side of this thing, if we move beyond it in the notice of motion section and neither of them receive a mover or a seconder later under new business, that's where they fall off the table. So if there's no further dialogue on it at this point, I'd move into 8.1 for the bylaw. Okay, that's what we'll do then. First and second and third reading of bylaw 2022-8, a bylaw to adopt the community safety and well-being plan. Well, that's something that's been underway for quite a period of time, mandated by the province. And former employee Hassan Rouhani and a consultant by the name of Mr. Fay had a great hand in the ultimate outcome, along with a number of volunteers that are listed in the plan, plus all the citizens who were so kind as to respond back by survey what concerned them about community safety and well-being. So we thank everybody at this point in time for allowing us to get to the finish line on that, because it was certainly a comprehensive undertaking. So on that basis, I would take a mover and a seconder for this bylaw. Moved by Councillor Vinecore, seconded by Councillor Corbett. Whereas Council for the Township of Bonfield deems it expedient to pass 3 readings of the following bylaw at this session, be it hereby resolved that a bylaw to adopt a community safety and well-being plan be read a first, second, and third time, passed and numbered 2022-8, and that the said bylaw be signed by the mayor and clerk, sealed with the seal of the corporation, and be engrossed in the bylaw book. And that this bylaw be posted on the municipal website for public information purposes. Any questions? Yes, Councillor Foisey.
Yes, I would like to thank the advisory committee for at least the mention of having some noise issues, but it seems to be just in passing as a footnote. It obviously was a great concern in Ottawa.
Okay, thank you. All in favor? Carried. Item 9, disbursements. I would take a mover and a seconder to table them, and then we could ask some questions. Moved by Councillor Viancourt, seconded by Councillor Corbett. I'll open the floor to questions related to the disbursements, if there are any. Yes, Councillor Viancourt, and then Councillor Foyce.
Yeah, just a question on insurance with on page 1 of 6 for the line item with cyber insurance. Was that quoted? I don't know if Ann could answer this or CEO Walker. The price, is that something new or is that always, I mean, we've had cyber insurance, I guess, before, but I see it's broken down here with the other insurance numbers.
Just before they answer, one thing I've noticed that this time the disbursement for the insurance is broke out throughout the disbursements related to each department's cost share, like recreation and other things. But just from what I know in having discussions with the previous CAO and that cyber attack that we endured there about, what was it, 2 years ago? The cost of that is quite a small investment for what could have happened to all of our electronic files without it. So, but whoever chooses to answer with greater clarity on that, please do so.
Through your worship, I'm going to defer the discussion to this to the person who is better and more fulsome understanding. I'm going to pass that to our Deputy Clerk, Andre.
Thanks.
Your question regarding cyber insurance, this is I believe the second year that we've paid it. And it's as a result of the cyber attack we had in 2019. And for like Mayor McLaren stated, it's a small price to pay for what we could have had to pay out had we had to pay off the attackers. The insurance is, as Mayor McLaren pointed out, it usually is prepaid in December and then broken down into January and February, where council would not really see those numbers. So in this disbursement, the insurance is the actual true cost divided by all the departments that is affected by that.
Okay, thanks, Andre. Yeah, I just hadn't seen it before, so because. All right.
Okay. Councillor Foisey, you had a question? You're muted at the moment.
Page 1 is 6, liabilities. There are 2 legal fees. I just don't remember what they were for.
Oh, both of those are related to shoreline road allowance files, I think. Are they not? We're looking at the Russell Christie
Are
fees.
you asking about Francisca and Topolinski? That does have to do with Shore Road counseling for those 2 properties.
Okay.
And the applicants always pay in advance a retainer fee, and we reimburse if there's anything left after the legal work is done.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions related to the disbursement? Okay.
Page 5. Oh, sorry. Page 5
Go
of
ahead.
Parks and Recreation splash park water tests.
I had noted that too, and it's
So
probably
if I may, that
go ahead,
the
Deputy Clerk.
requirement that we must do. Sorry, it's a requirement for the splash pad installation that we have 6 months of clean water tests so that we can use our own well at the installation of the splash park.
Okay, so that means we're going to have a splash pad.
Yes.
Okay.
We did receive almost $500,000 from the Heritage Fund related to the splash park development, among other things that were on the grant application. And there's further good news coming later this week regarding that same funding application. Any other questions related to the disbursements? Okay, I'll read the motion and there'll be a last call event again. Motion moved by Councillor Viancourt, seconded by Councillor Corbett, that the following disbursements be approved as prepared. All departments under APO 5962 for a subtotal of $407,221.10 and payroll batches 1195 through 1199 amounting to $54,958.69, resulting in a total disbursement of $462,169.79. Last call for any questions related to it. All in favor? Carried. Correspondence and information. First item, St. Bernadette Parish withdrawing severance application B20 2021 and a request for a refund or consideration in whole or in part of their fees that they had paid for that application. Would there be a mover and a seconder for that motion? Moved by Councillor Viancourt, seconded by Councillor Corbett. The refund amount at the pre-prepared motion is blank at this point in time, but as I spoke to earlier, this particular file caused a great amount of angst at committee level and at council level and other such things. And I'm of the opinion myself that it's a good gesture on the parish's part to withdraw this application. So I personally have no problem with reimbursing all of the fees. If that is what council wishes to entertain, I could mark that in the motion. Okay. I'll read the motion then. Moved by Councillor Viancourt, seconded by Councillor Corbett. Whereas the St. Bernadette Parish has withdrawn their severance application B20 2021, and whereas they had paid a fee of $1,200, and whereas they are requesting a full or partial refund of said fee. Therefore, the Council of the Township of Bonfield authorizes a refund in the amount of $1,200. Any questions? All in favor? Carried. Next item, St. Bernadette Parish requesting a contribution towards the annual picnic. As the letter describes, annually, we usually donate $200 towards the printing of the 50/50 tickets. If that is what council chooses to do again, I could fill in that amount in the pre-prepared motion. Councillor Corbett?
I have no problem with the $200. I guess my only point would be, I think wherever possible, I would feel more comfortable moving away from the words of donations more into a sponsorship wording, just so that there's value for taxpayers' dollars. So I like the $200. We're going to get some level of an advertisement for it. So I think we're actually purchasing a value as opposed to just making a donation. I just be more comfortable moving forward if we can, wherever possible, steer away from the language of donations.
Okay, very good. So I take a mover and a seconder for the motion then. Moved by Councillor Corbett, seconded by Councillor Foisey. Whereas the St. Bernadette Parish has requested council's consideration in a donation towards their annual parish picnic to be held July 26th, 2022. Be it hereby resolved that council approves of a $200 donation. Any questions? All in favor? Carried. Next item, review of the seniors housing capital agreement. As described earlier, this is another file that there's been a great deal of work put into. There's a number of documents in our package related to it. And the one that came to me this afternoon in email dialogue with CAO Walker was the actual term sheet and bank lending proposal that I saw this evening, but I haven't had a chance to look at all yet. But the motion, as it speaks to, points to a bylaw that needs to be prepared anyway, and I'm sure it encompasses that agreement at that point in time. So, CAO Walker, is there any words you'd like to say related to this next step in the process related to the seniors housing?
Through your worship, if you don't mind, I believe this is a great opportunity for the community of Bonfield. I am very impressed with the support that has been made available through council and the excitement that there is from the outgoing CAO, Peter Johnson, to see this particular project come to fruition. I put my full support behind it as well. We have a bylaw that we are going to prepare for the next meeting. Prior to reviewing that bylaw, we will hopefully be able to have a full report on the financials. I was hoping to get that in its fullness in front of council before this meeting. We've come up a little short on time, but hopefully another 2 weeks will give us time to have that for your full review. And thank you very much for the opportunity to speak on it.
Okay, and the motion speaks to a draft agreement tonight, so obviously there's a lot of items at play here yet needing refinement. But the one thing I noted just in reading the it's called the Municipal Capital Facilities Agreement, I guess, overview page, when it speaks to in section 3C, the municipality shall, pursuant to subsection 110(6) of the Municipal Act 2001, exempt the property from property taxation for municipal and education purposes. I know there's been a lot of past dialogue related to in-kind contribution and other such things. It's just this particular clause C doesn't speak to a beginning or end date of the waiver of taxation. And I'm certain at some point in time, the entity will need to be taxed by the municipality. So I just bring that to our attention for discussion going forward of whether that figure has been quantified, first of all, on our side of the table, of what, you know, we know approximately what the building is going to cost and be assessed at. But second of all, just noting that when that tax forgiveness, I'll call it, for lack of a better word, would begin and when it would end, I guess, is what I'll flag it. I'm flagging it only at this point for further clarification at another time. I trust CAO Walker heard me. He seems to be frozen again, but that's okay. So on that note for tonight, on that basis and in our package, there's a motion to accept the capital agreement and draft oversight agreement pending, you know, further documents being received and a bylaw being created. So I would take a mover and a seconder for that. Moved by Councillor Corbett, seconded by Councillor Foisey, that council accepts the draft seniors housing agreement and the draft oversight agreement, and that a bylaw be prepared for both agreements for the next council meeting. As we heard a few moments ago, next council meeting being a target to work towards pending receipt of all the necessary documents. Any questions on it at all? Yes, Councillor Foisey.
Yeah, I'd just like to know who prepared those agreements?
I can't answer that. at this
Through
point, I
your
believe.
worship, if I could.
Yes, go ahead.
Through your worship, these two documents before you in the package were prepared by our lawyer, Ed Delbloom.
Okay. Any other questions? All in favor? Carried. Item 4, statement of remuneration and expenses. Under the Municipal Act, every member of a council and their committees that get compensated financially for being on a council or a municipal committee where they receive financial compensation. Oh, lots of flags coming up here. What have I done wrong?
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, I just wanted to make a comment that the statement has been amended this afternoon to reflect the North Bay Mattawa Conservation Authority letter that we received regarding Councillor Lagasse sitting on that board. So there was a slight adjustment done.
I see. Okay. So on that note, every member of, yes, Councillor Corbett.
Sorry, just one more amendment, suggested amendment, unless you'd like to leave it as is, but it says that my remuneration, there's a decimal missing. There's a decimal missing on one of my lines.
Oh, you got 38,000 in a little bit of time you've been on council.
It's very generous for the very short amount of time I've been here.
It'll show up on your T4, don't worry. Okay, so we got a couple of noted amendments to the statement that'll appear on the website. But on that basis, I would take a mover and a seconder to further the process along. Moved by Councillor Vinecore, seconded by Councillor Corbett. Whereas Section 284 of the Municipal Act 2001, Standing Order 2001, Section 25, as amended, requires the treasurer of a municipality shall in each year on or before March 31st provide to the council of the municipality an itemized statement on remuneration and expenses paid in the previous year. Be it hereby resolved that council for the corporation of the Township of Bonfield accepts the 2021 statement of remuneration and expenses itemized for each member of council and member of local boards and committees as submitted. Any questions on this one? All in favor? Carried. As you can see, and if the public chooses to take attention for all of the aggravation and frustration sometimes that our committee members endure, they're certainly not overly compensated. Let's put it that way. Item 4, item 5, WR National Wall of Remembrance Project requesting support. This is one, again, that on an annual basis we typically support. The fee this year for the business card size sponsorship that we have historically purchased is $319. Would there be a mover and a seconder for this item? Moved by Councillor Foisey, seconded by Councillor Corbett, that the Corporation of the Township of Bonfield supports the WOR National Wall of Remembrance Association in the form of a business card size sponsorship in the amount of $319 plus taxes. To support the project, Canadian Fallen is the virtual component of the National Wall of Remembrance in Kingston, Ontario. It is built on the foundation of creating a single place of remembrance for all of Canada's fallen soldiers from the War of 1812 through Afghanistan. It celebrates the men and women who fell while serving and protecting this great country. Is there any questions on this one? All in favor? Carried. Item 6 and 7 basically are tied together. One is item 6, City of Sarnia and City of Thorold, and the other one is the Township of Agila Toserantio. They're very upset with the LPAT. It's called the Land, I forget what the full acronym stands for now. It's the new Ontario Municipal Board is what it is. The LPAT, that acronym.
Your worship, it's Ontario Land Tribunal.
Yeah. And what it does is, as we've discussed earlier this evening, related to severance and rezonings and other such things, it serves as the appeal mechanism for citizens or the municipality to appeal to if development changes are not seemingly acceptable. So while it replaced the Ontario Municipal Board in some regards, it still tends to serve generally the same function. So neither entity was very popular in their day because they add another layer of complexity to getting certain developments done in municipalities where there's opposition to it. So I don't know if in our particular case, our support one way or the other is warranted or necessary. We haven't ourselves ever had requirement to appeal to the entity, the new entity of it. But certainly in municipalities where a lot of development is occurring, I'm sure they have frequent interaction with it. So it's up to council whether they want to entertain a motion to support next meeting or not. There is no pre-prepared one for tonight, or just take it as information. Okay, we'll take it as information as the what I see happening. All right. So then we've moved to, looks like I've maybe skipped something. Nope. Okay. We're moving to information. Oh, yes, there it is. Information section 2022 municipal election procedures, and our team, our administrative team that are going to be involved with conducting a municipal election this October have drafted up the necessary policy document for those seeking elected office, and that nomination period is not far away. It opens up in a few months. So on that basis, and the report itself explains that council basically has no input in the process because it could be perceived as being advantageous to the incumbents if we were to pick dates or times or locations or other such things, and that seems very prudent. So administration of the municipal election is in the domain of our municipal staff, CAO Walker and Deputy Clerk Gagne and others as delegated. So I would take a motion to accept the election procedures policy document. A mover and a seconder for that. Moved by Councillor Corbett, seconded by Councillor Vinecore, that council for the Township of Bonfield accepts the recommendation from the Deputy Clerk's memo regarding municipal election procedures for information purposes only, and that the 2022 municipal election procedures be made available on the municipal website and to all candidates through the election package. Any questions? All in favor? Carried. Next item, DSAB.
Through you, your worship. Your
Yes.
worship, can I just interject for a second?
Yes, please
We
go ahead.
did miss one item under section 10. I'm gonna just turn off my camera so you can hear me. Under section 10.7, Township of Agila, Torsanto, and Township of Punchlanch. This motion to support funding for infrastructure projects, and it's relevant to culverts, which is important to our municipality. And it's a request that the provincial government provide better funding for more funding opportunities for replacement of culverts and bridges. And that was one I was hoping that I could get council's support, so I could prepare a letter and send it in similar fashion to what is provided in the package. I could send it in to the Premier of the province.
Okay, there is no, yeah, and I apologize for skipping over that. I knew there was some other item of substance there that I seem to pass over. So there's no pre-prepared motion for that, but we can certainly draft one on the fly related to it tonight, or at the next meeting, we could table one if you so desire. Yes, Deputy Clerk Gagne.
The motion is prepared. It should be in your package. If not, I could read it.
Okay, please read it.
Whereas the Council of the Township of Bonneville supports the Township of Adjala Tozorantio and the Township of Puslinch funding support request for the federal and provincial government to provide more funding to rural municipalities to support infrastructure projects related to major bridge and culvert replacements. Therefore, Council directs staff to forward a support resolution to the Premier of Ontario, Honorable Peter Bethenfley, Ontario Minister of Finance, Honorable Chrystia Freeland, Federal Minister of Finance, AMO, and all other municipalities.
Okay, is there a mover and a seconder for that? Moved by Councillor Foisey, seconded by Councillor Vinecourt. Any questions on the motion? All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Okay, moving to information then, item 2, DSAB motion, provincial funding for housing and health supports. There's no motion in our agenda for that, but it's underway at the DSAB level. Item 3, item for discussion, Councillor Foisey, Ombudsman report, removal of deputy mayor.
Yes, I don't think we dealt. Oh, sorry.
Item for discussion. Yes, go ahead.
Yes, I don't think we had brought that up for discussion prior to it having been posted on the website.
The posting of it on the website was an order by the Ombudsman's office itself. It's mandatory that you post it immediately upon receiving the report. The recommendations that the Ombudsman had in there, I alluded to in my Christmas bulletin, in that while the Ombudsman report is always signed off by the official Ombudsman, which is Mr. Paul Dubé, I never had occasion to speak with him. There's staff, subordinate staff underneath that both CAO Johnston and myself had spoke with at length a number of times related to the matter. And their advice to us and what came through in the report was that while it was completely out of their domain to give advice or direction related to the whole subject matter, they took interest in it only because they had received the complaint, first of all, and second of all, they were intrigued about how it could be communicated better to the public of the Township of Bonfield and how that process evolved in its own way. So even prior to receiving the report, I had made commitment to them that I would communicate by way of because they said, well, how would you facilitate that, being that it's kind of a stale subject now by the time they were working through their investigation. I said, well, we typically do like a newsletter type thing that goes out in the mail, and I could, try to summarize it and bring it to description in that regard. And they were satisfied with that. And as I alluded to in the Christmas greeting of this year or past year, I intend to do that in that that was a commitment I made to the Ombudsman's office, and I intend to live up to it. It just hasn't happened yet, that's all. Yes, Councillor Foisey.
Yes, I did give you some information, but I'd like to read what what transpired to end up depriving ex-deputy mayor Baudouin of her title, if I may. It's not that long.
Okay,
So at a regular council meeting, November 10th, 2020, Mayor Randall McLaren, I think we need a discussion on the authority of the deputy mayor, and even if that has any validity in this municipality anymore. And as handy as Ed Veldblum is there's provision in the Municipal Act that consent required by the mayor to have a deputy mayor. And I've been of the opinion for a few months now that I'd like to withdraw that consent. Now, I know it's been appointed by bylaw, but I think for the benefit of this meeting, I must state right now that consent is withdrawn and this municipality no longer has a deputy mayor. I didn't want to do that in this kind of a format because that's another matter that shouldn't have been handled in an in-camera session, but going forward from Deputy Mayor Baudouin. What township doesn't have a deputy mayor? Mayor Randall McLaren. Going forward from 9:38 p.m. on November 10th, 2020, the township of Bonfield no longer has a deputy mayor position occupied by any councillor. I just decided that. I have withdrawn my consent under the Municipal Act. So the only person that will be signing and faxing that form is me, and it depends on what council decides over the next few moments. So do you want to call a vote on this now? We can do so. Councillor Baudouin, we are going to vote on it. Councillor Vaillancourt, I'd like to ask a question here to Ed Veldblum. Can you reinstate it anyways? Mayor Randall McLaren, when I wake up tomorrow morning and reinstate it, probably, I have to have some justification for doing so. Probably 13,088 cases in the province would be a good reason to do so. I'm not here to make trouble with council. My council in the majority says they want to cancel. It removes the obligation for me every Monday morning to meet with the emergency control group. And if we lose 4 to 5 citizens on it, it's not my burden to carry anymore, is it? For this council sent the message that COVID is not a problem here. Go and live your happy life. We can reopen the municipal office. The staff will all book off using their provisions under the collective agreement because they've been pretty clear to me that a lot of them have their particular health issues, that they're more than happy to see this declaration of an emergency and the protocols that it provided. But if you want to expose everybody to COVID, go ahead and pass the motion. Take the liability on. So how reckless we can behave sometimes. Councillor Baudouin, I'd like a recorded vote, please. Councillor Vaillancourt, Mr. Veldblum, do you have any comment on that? Councillor Baudouin requested a recorded vote on resolution number 17. Yea, Sylvie Baudouin, Eric Quizzy. Nay, Jane Legacy, Mark Vaillancourt, Randall McLaren. Defeated. Mayor McLaren, can you point out the provision in the Municipal Act that enable you to withdraw the consent for a deputy mayor? I was not able to find it.
is that a question?
Yes, please.
Oh, okay. I meant to look that up earlier today and I didn't, but I believe it's section 283 of the Municipal Act. But prior to your question, when I saw this on the agenda tonight too, I wondered why you were raising the discussion of this again, but that's okay. You reiterated the fact, some of the dialogue related to that evening about the state of the emergency, locally declared state of emergency, and whether it should be lifted or not. And we're a long ways from then, but I will confirm for our viewers tonight that we still remain under a state of declared local emergency, along with 184 other municipalities in the province of Ontario who have done so now for coming on 2 years. I believe March 17th will be our 2-year anniversary. If it remains in effect, that will be a subject to conversation tomorrow morning at our emergency control group meeting. But having said that, there's 184 municipalities still under a local state of emergency related to the COVID-19 pandemic. That's 41% of the municipalities in the province. So when I seen that you were raising this ombudsman matter, it caused me a bit of concern in that why you were tabling it for discussion. The task as described by the ombudsman was left to the staff, first of all, to, when the time is right, open that. The recommendation from the ombudsman is to have that discussion about how our procedural bylaw speaks to appointing or removing a deputy mayor. And currently our procedural bylaw has no language or mention of how a deputy mayor is removed. It only speaks to the fact of how one is selected and appointed. And as I described to the ombudsman's office in the length of dialogue that we had on the subject matter, it's been a glaring oversight in our municipality's part as well about and a tremendous disrespect shown to the heads of council under that section of the Municipal Act, which I, in answer to your question, I believe is section 283, but I'll confirm that for you for next meeting. At every inaugural meeting, the head of council, it should be done, like all things of good taste, it should be done prior to and in the background before that highly ceremonial meeting, but it should be asked of the newly elected head of council whether they wish to have a deputy mayor or not, because that's exactly what the Municipal Act says. The head of council can allow or can consent, is the actual word that the legislation uses, to have a deputy mayor, or they can consent not to have one. And on that basis, and having said it that way, the reason this should be done in a informal matter prior to the inaugural meeting is because I've been sworn into council enough times to know that that's, you know, everybody's putting their best foot forward at that point in time. Goodwill is there. It's a brand new council getting sworn in. And the last thing you want is a bunch of awkwardness in the room of saying, no, I don't want a deputy mayor because I, don't particularly like the candidate or just feel I don't need one or whatever. It's an awkward discussion. And that's, I think, historically how it got overlooked, that the head of council actually has the choice of whether they can have a deputy mayor in place or not. And the deputy mayor under the Municipal Act and any other act, it's very clear what their role is. They're to fill in the absence of the head of council, and or if the head of council cannot act for whatever reason, then if there's a naturally recognized and appointed alternate, that's the only point in time that they have any authority whatsoever. So I was a deputy mayor myself way back when, and when you're elected, it's a prestigious thing to say you're the deputy mayor, but it really has no bearing in other than in the absence of the actual head of council. So in that regard, it's section 283 of the Municipal Act. Just because you've brought the subject up, and I want to clarify it for the new members of staff and the new members of council that are sitting before me tonight in this meeting, and our viewers, because it's going to be a struggle for me to describe in a brief way what led us to currently not having a deputy mayor. But I'll go on record as saying I've since becoming the head of council 11 years ago, I've had 5 deputy mayors in that duration. The first term of council, I had 4 because they were all elected by acclamation. And I stated from the outset that there was no known procedure under our procedural bylaw to pick one. So each of them would have a 1-year duration of serving as the deputy mayor under me. And that worked very well. And then with the subsequent 2 elections in the past 2 terms, there was a outcome that the procedural bylaw was allowed to stand, in that it has a process. The highest vote getter becomes the deputy mayor. So long way to say, I've had 5 deputy mayors and only 1 that I've had to remove from that role by withdrawing the consent. Where we came to withdraw that consent was some of what you recapped in your dialogue line item there, in that the communication situation was deteriorating, and the council had, prior to that, adopted a communications motion that was quite, could be called illegal, or it could be called very difficult, but nonetheless, the CAO and myself found it necessary to take legal action at our personal expense. The CAO's legal fees have been reimbursed, mine have not, but nonetheless, at that point in time, we expressed great personal expense to bring some level of decorum and rationalness back to the council that was acting at that point in time quite recklessly. You used the word for me there, and that's maybe not the best word that I chose, but it was reckless behavior that was occurring at that point in time. And it was proven later by the integrity commissioner and others that have reviewed it. Our own municipal lawyer was more delicate in his words, in that he said it was just unworkable and inappropriate, I think was the word he used. But nonetheless, at that point in time, with the personal circumstances I had at home, with a wife that had just come home from the hospital, and a council going off the rails with seemingly illegal motions being passed in the majority, and cumbersome policies being imposed upon me that had no bearing or rationality, notwithstanding the fact, over and above all of that, a COVID local declared state of emergency, national and a worldwide calamity. I had my council stirring up the dust here over, communications. So where it kind of hit the fan, and where consent for the deputy mayor position was withdrawn is, and because you've reviewed that video very clearly, and I'm thankful for that video, you've recapped it quite well, but you've left out some of the most important parts, where I asked the deputy mayor of the day if she intended to fax in that document, if in fact council did declare the state of emergency over. Was it her intention to, as she stated, fax in the document to Emergency Measures Ontario? And it was clearly her statement, for the record, that yes, she would. And at that point in time, it was clear to me that the deputy mayor we had did not in any way, shape, or form understand her role as a deputy mayor, because the deputy mayor never holds authority over the head of council unless I, first of all, allow someone else to act on my behalf, or I'm incapacitated in some way and they need to act on my behalf. And it had been my opinion for quite some time that there was actions being taken in the background that seemingly that authority was misunderstood. And AMO and other parties train municipal councillors every term of council. We pay for members of council to go and take training. And here I had a member of council with 5 years experience, clearly not understanding the role of being the alternate to the head of council. So, and having taken part in it, as I described earlier, quite a reckless imposition of a piece of policy that I had no idea what was coming next, because when things start to go wrong, they can really go wrong fast when people are acting outside of the law and they're acting outside of their authority. And it was asked and it was stated very clearly that that member of council intended to act outside of their legal authority with no reservation at all. Stated for the record, I'm going to do this. Thankfully, the council that evening had the wisdom to not vote in favor of that reckless intention. But even if they had, it wasn't the place of that member of council to fax anything into Emergency Measures Ontario. That piece of action rested solely with me. Many times as a head of council, this council will make choices that I disagree with, but it's still my obligation to sign the documents and forward them on to the appropriate authorities. And it became clear to me at that point in time that this member of council fully intended to exceed their authority. And as such, I have no, as was described earlier, our procedural bylaw and the Municipal Act does not hold any methods or capabilities for me to expel or remove a member of council from council, but it does speak to the fact that I can consent or not consent to having a designated alternate to my authority. And at that point in time, as you described, at 9:38 p.m. on that particular date, when it was proven to me that that authority could no longer stand, I withdrew that authority, and I stand behind that decision today because just like you watched that piece of video, I think that should be shown to every kid in school because it shows how reckless people can be when they're misinformed about their authorities. So we'll see that as a separate thing. This will all come to pass with this whole Ottawa police investigation. Without a doubt, when you put 20,000 police officers in the city of Ottawa, there's probably one or two that acted outside of their authority too, in the whole thing that occurred last weekend. And that'll come to light and it'll be dealt with accordingly. This matter related to the removal of the deputy mayor was as far as I could go within the law, and it was done appropriately. But was it done in a classy way? No, it was not. But it was necessitated by the fact that it could no longer be allowed that that authority be it was greatly misunderstood authority that that particular person thought they held, and that needed to be quashed immediately because the behavior was becoming more than this municipality could stand, as the record will and the history will clearly demonstrate. So as I said to you earlier, putting all that in words and putting it in everybody's mailbox is going to prove difficult for the average person to understand, but that's the basis of it. So is there any further discussion you'd like on it, Councillor Foisey? Yes? Okay.
Section 283 of the Municipal Act, it's remuneration and expenses. And the
Okay.
Act, and the Ombudsman Ontario report, it says the Act does not specify that the head of council can unilaterally remove a deputy mayor once appointed by council, or that continued consent of the head is required. The township's procedural bylaws does not currently indicate a process for removal from this position.
Okay, maybe I have the section wrong, and I told you earlier that I would provide that to you at the next meeting. But as I've said to this council a number of times, and I'll say it to any citizen, when I state something for the record, it's because I've researched it and I know I have the facts. And I know that the head of council must consent to having an alternate. The Municipal Act and our procedural bylaw, neither one speak to how or when or if that consent can be withdrawn. But what I'm stating for your record tonight is I was never asked, first of all, to consent to having an alternate. And I told you why. because it's a delicate situation, past practice, other such things, everybody being amicable. Nobody wants to say, no, I don't want one. And generally speaking, like I've said in my statement tonight, I've had alternate or deputy mayor, whatever you want to call it, in the past, 4 other ones. Great working relationship. For a number of years, great working relationship with the one that was removed, but it came that it couldn't be workable anymore by what I just described a few moments earlier, and my consent was withdrawn. And under the Municipal Act, and I pointed this out to the Ombudsman's reps as well, if consent is required, whether implied or not, under the Municipal Act, consent can also be withdrawn. And what the Ombudsman was at a loss to explain, because even the Municipal Act doesn't explain it, is clarity around how that consent can be withdrawn. So because you've raised it tonight, for our staff who are listening, and we'll work towards drafting an amendment to our procedural bylaw at some point in time, we need to put a line item in there for the inaugural meeting. Does the head of council consent to having an alternate? And you could call it a deputy mayor, you could call it whatever you want under the Municipal Act. Does the head of council consent? Yes or no? That will be a step in the inaugural meeting, and the head of council elect and designate would say yes or no. Then if one is appointed, there should be language in the procedural bylaw of when that consent's withdrawn, how that is enacted. But there is never any question that it's a unilateral decision of the head of council. The Municipal Act says the head of council holds that consent, but I agree with both the Ombudsman's office and the outcome of our particular event, that there is a much clearer and more appropriate way for that consent to be withdrawn than what happened in our particular case. Our particular case left a lot of hard feelings, I'll say, and it wasn't done as well as it could have been on that basis. Is there anything else related to this? Yes, Councillor Foisey.
Yes, just as a final point. In the inaugural meeting of December 5th, 2018, moved by Councillor Vancourt, second by Councillor Lagacé, that Councillor Sylvie Baudouin be appointed Deputy Mayor for the term of the council. Carried, Randall McLaren.
That's right, under the implied consent of myself. I did not deny consent at that point in time because it seemed appropriate to have one appointed. But when it was very clearly stated, and you've reviewed that meeting video, that authority was being used inappropriately, I withdrew that consent. And I think, sir, you should be congratulating me for that as opposed to chastising or questioning me for that, because it was very necessary for the benefit of this municipality at that point in time. Yes.
You could have used section 241, subsection 2, power to expel. The head of council or other presiding officer may expel any person for improper conduct at a meeting. You could have done that instead of taking away the deputy mayor status of Councillor Baudouin.
I would respond to that by saying, no, I could not, because the individual at that point in time serving as the alternate to the head of council had the document from Emergency Measures Ontario. They had it filled out, she said. If council motion went the way she was hoping it would, she fully intended to fax it into Emergency Measures Ontario the next morning. There's a couple problems with that. One, that individual, the deputy mayor at that point in time, had no such authority to do that and would have been acting completely out of their authority and the law. But they fully intended to do so, which is as reckless as it can get. Second of all, if that alternate to me had taken any training and had been involved with the emergency control group along the way and all of the exercises and training that we did, they probably would have been much more aware of what their role was and what their authorities were. But that particular individual made no effort to become engaged with that process that ultimately became necessary under the local state of emergency. So as I described earlier, the council in the majority, 60%, had already passed some policy that was quite reckless on its own. I had a member of council that was stating they were going to go far and away above their legal authority and start faxing documents into the province of Ontario that they had no right whatsoever to do. And second of all, they had, for a long period of time, chosen not to involve themselves in any education related to their role in that capacity. And you're saying that I should have given them the benefit of the doubt and just expelled them from the meeting? I should have expelled them from the municipality. And that's what ultimately happened anyway, under her own accord. So it's for the best for everybody.
Point of order, Your Worship.
Yes.
In just trying to get this meeting to move ahead, I will quote either under our procedural bylaws, rules of debate, section 19, members have up to 5 minutes, or if we want to call it a presentation, we have up to 15 minutes. I think we've exhausted both of those at this point. I'm hoping we can move the meeting along.
Yes, I agree. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. So next item, 4, Castle Home guarantee and postponement of claims. CAO Walker, would you lead our discussion on that, please? Because there's quite a plethora of documentation there. And there's been, I think, some new stuff come by email today on that from the CAO of the City of North Bay. So I don't believe there's anything we need to vote on tonight, but it's certainly moving along. But I'll allow you to speak to it if you wouldn't mind. Hopefully.
Yes, through your worship, can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Can everyone hear me?
You're a little garbled, but give us your best shot.
Okay, I've turned my camera off just to save some bandwidth. These documents that are... Okay, I will attempt. These documents provided in the agenda package are for information purposes, for council to be brought up to speed and to have an understanding of what has transpired recently within the progression. And even as of today, we've had some updated and refreshed documentation come in that's relevant as well. So the main point is these documents are before the City of North Bay's Council at their council meeting this evening. We will await the outcome of that meeting to see if this will proceed and progress forward, or if this item will be having to have some more work done on it. And so if you could just take this information for a council of what's going on in terms of the guaranteeing of our portion for the Township of Bonfield of the loan required to Infrastructure Ontario. So that's all I can give for now, and we'll hope by the next meeting have a much greater picture and understanding of where things are at.
Okay, thank you.
I hope you caught all that.
Yes, I did at least come through fairly clear. All right, new business. I take it that both of them would need a mover and seconder to be tabled. So 11.1, regarding the Planning Advisory Committee, is there a mover for that? Okay, so that one has fallen by the wayside. And item 2, the notice of motion reimbursement of severance application, that's already been dealt with. So I assume there's no mover for that. Okay, unfinished business, the Planning Advisory Board letter to Mayor and Council. As I described earlier, it would seem that the parties are willing to work towards staying members of our Planning Advisory Committee. So I think we can set that aside for tonight as well. There's no addendum or in camera. So I've now reached the point of confirmatory bylaw, and I take a mover and a seconder for it. Moved by Councillor Vinecourt, seconded by Councillor Corbett. Whereas council deems it expedient to pass 3 readings of the following bylaw at this session, be it hereby resolved that a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of council from January 25th, 2022 to February 22nd, 2022, we read a first, second, and third time, passed and numbered 2022-8, and that the said bylaw be signed by the mayor and clerk, sealed with the seal of the corporation, and be engrossed in the bylaw book. All in favor? Carried. Which leads us to the end of our meeting. To take a mover and a seconder for adjournment. Moved by Councillor Vinecourt, seconded by Councillor Corbett, that this meeting adjourn at 8:53 p.m. All in favor? Carried, and thank you.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Right.